All right, well, welcome everyone. This is Doc Robert McTyre, myself, and also, and we're here again. I know we've been away for a while. We're doing a DSQ Live for a while. We apologize for that dropped off, but this is a new year and a new start for Detroit Stories Quarterly, and we're going into our fourth year, or we're going into our fourth
Fourth
year
year.
of publication,
Um,
and we've got Volume 3, Issue 4, the spring summer edition is coming out in a couple of weeks, and we're really excited about that. We got, hmm? Yeah, I've got some great.
well, fall, winter is
No,
what's coming out.
I'm sorry. Right,
Right.
the fall
Yes,
winter issue is coming
that's
out.
okay. You're thinking ahead. That's what we need. That's
So,
all right, Keith.
yeah, so we're
Yeah.
and so we're your fall winter issue is coming out, and but we know we've got some great stuff in there, and so we wanted to talk about it and get hopefully you'll be excited as well. One thing I think while we're talking, I think because the book cover on this thing, and I'm gonna see if I can while we're talking, I want to because I think people need to see the book cover that we had for this, which I think is just just remarkable, and it got me so excited. I said at some point I almost wish I I almost wish I had seen the book cover before I started writing. I could have written a story just based on the book cover all
That's an
by
idea,
itself,
Keith. Yeah.
because I said it's just
Yep.
an incredible okay, here I've got it, and I'm getting ready to share the screen here. Okay, yeah, there we go. And then okay, can you see? Yeah, you see, so that's the cover of our
Yeah.
upcoming fall winter 2022 edition, and those are the authors that we'll be talking about in this edition. Myself, Bruz Monday, April Ramirez, Michael Dancher, and of course Doc R.E. McTyre. But yeah, that cover just when Cornelia sent that to me, and we'll have the artist credited in it as we always do. But it just puts you in a whole nother frame of mind, which is what we try to do with the stories and with DSQ. I mean, something that you're just not expecting.
Yes.
I think this accomplishes that objective. And so, well, I guess we'll start with we were talking just before we got on. We're talking about Abel Ramirez's story, so we might as well just dive into that.
Yes.
Dark Covenant, and which is another great entry. I know Abel submitted several great pieces before. But this one really, I think I can literally say kind of gave me chills when I was reading, because it's definitely a horror story, but it has other elements in it too.
It
But
does.
but when it comes in, when you start talking about the satanic ritual and the whole and we always try to talk about it without spoiling it for people, but basically what you've got is a story of a guy reuniting with an old friend, who's been on some hard times, and knocks on the door and wants to, if you can spend some time. And of course, as you see in too many relationships, the wife is, the husband's always the one that's got the broken down buddies. You see that too many times. Friends, the friends from the hood, from back from the old block, old neighborhood, come and knock on the door, and the wife is like, when are you going to cut these guys loose? And of course, in this particular instance, there turns out to be there's more than one reason. It's not just his, past, but it's just the relationships he's been having with some more than questionable characters have followed him around, and now that confrontation that he has, but then he comes to rescue his friend later at the end. I mean, it starts out, you're kind of upset because here he is bringing this into his friend's house, and why would you bring something so evil, even though it wasn't intentional, but I think he had to know that there was some kind of it was tagged on to him. And then of course his friend doesn't want to believe it. Every time his friend tries to tell him, he doesn't want to believe it, in terms of what is really happening. And then at the end, of course, the friend comes through, and it's really the one that kind of helps him out, because he just got that guilt about what's going on. And just that, like you said, the twist at the end, because the one part in there, which readers will find out, that I think is just so interesting, it's kind of a twist I've seen before, where you kind of fool the devil. you think you signed
Literally.
yeah,
Right.
literally. You thought
Yes.
I mean, this is really a real plug for lawyers, because they basically called him and said, no, that's not the contract we signed. Our contract, and he's like, oh, because somebody's been reading the fine print, and
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead. What do you?
Well, no, I was just I was thinking about is it Faustus? Yeah, in kind of the classical literature. There's a little bit of that in there, but was what I love about it. I was there's a redemptive quality in this, because if anybody knows DSQ, each one of us, me, Keith, and Cornelius, we are very distinctly unique and individuals into ourselves.
Yeah,
I tend to be, kind of, and each of them are faith driven. Okay, I want to say that both, both Keith and Corey, but I'm a leader in a church and that sort of thing. So when I read our stories, I'm always, I'm looking for a little bit of, redemptive quality and all of this. And I've told Keith, I was halfway through reviewing this, and I was about to call him and say, man, you know what? I don't think we can run this. This is too dark. And I know that's some of our viewers are gonna say, "Oh, good, this ought to be interesting." But people in my church are readers of our book, by the way.
Oh,
they,
okay.
I've been meaning to take. So, but the thing is, and I'm not going to give away the end, but there's a redemptive quality. Abel does a wonderful job of rescuing kind of this whole dark direction that the protagonist goes in, and finds a way to try to help that individual come back to some level of redemption and all of that. So, but it's wonderfully done, and that's all I want to say about it. Buy the book. That's what I. Buy our next issue.
Right. No, it is it's a great piece. It's a great piece.
It is.
And well, I suggest that for the first. So, which one do you want to hit next?
Let's talk about Brust Mondays.
Oh yeah, yeah. The Order of the Arrow.
I think the readers they're going to find it was interesting in a couple of levels. Brust, of course, is I'm sorry about that. Brust is a he's a Detroiter, one of the professionals in our great city, and he brings that perspective into this story, which essentially is about similar to Abel's. It tends with friendship
and redemptive.
And him, reconnecting. The protagonist reconnects with a longtime friend who is now staying up in Michigan, in the upper part of Michigan, having retired as a police department dispatcher.
Right.
And but they have this history back when they were boys in being part of this kind of ritualistic activity. It was kind of like they were part of the Boy Scouts, but there was an extra kind of area that they that their pack or their troop could rise to if, in fact, they were to survive. It's like a survival thing, and they both have that history of going through that. And Brust does a great job. Not only is he reconnecting them, but in a lot of ways, because of there's also a history of. I think he's a veteran also. This friend, and there's some PT, post-traumatic stress syndrome underlying pieces in this.
Yeah,
and so so the story deals with that from a redemptive standpoint. Very powerfully done. I thought it was going to be a lot more mystical, but as it turns out, it's more on the side of real life being so horrifying sometimes that in and of itself plays a big role in
absolutely
the theme. It's still a sci-fi fantasy kind of thing to some extent. So
and I think,
what was your thought? Go ahead.
I think too, and like I said, I always reiterate, our publication leans strongly towards horror, sci-fi, fantasy, alternative, but we do occasionally run just straight fiction as well. We've had that, and I think even though we want to have that element, emphasized. And I think in Bruzz's piece, like you mentioned, there's the redemptive factor, and also, of course, anybody who's ever been involved in a society like fraternity or other thing, or the initiation, right, will really identify with what's happening, with some of the things that are happening in this story, and and because there's always that questioning part, how much of this is cruelty, and how much of this is bonding, and does is it and that goes back and forth for a while. You wonder, did this really bond us, or what was the issue with this? And I think it makes it kind of a dual level story, because you're talking about the one level of what they went through as kids, as younger people, joining an organization and bonding, but then of course, like you said, later they're reuniting, and the one who's been off to war and who's a veteran, and the traumatic effects of that. And I think that really makes it, like you said, Doc, I mean, there's that real life horror. I mean, sometimes my mother used to say, reality, your reality can be scarier than fiction, and
that is so true.
And in war does that, I mean, they so many people, and I think that's, when it comes back, anything, and I also look at it like, what they endured together as friends. And I'm thinking that's what Bruz was kind of getting to, what they endured together as friends growing up, joining that secret society together, and the bonding there. But then you contrast that with what war did,
and the work as a police dispatcher,
right, right, the work as a police dispatcher, and that kind of thing. It's like, it's like wow, what will that do, and what you need to do to get, to find peace in that, so it's a great piece. I really enjoyed it, and I guess from following the pattern, I'll look for the next one. I think Nola's bank investigation,
Michael
Michael Dancha. I think it's Dancha.
Thank you.
And this is the second piece. And this one is one that we're going to be running in as a serial, in parts. So this is the first part. It's a longer story, and Michael's a great writer. He is. He's a great writer, and I think this it also is more straight fiction, but it's just the detective aspect is what I really like. I mean, you're talking about a young girl, a guy who's a phenomenal detective, and who has a real scrappy attitude, and that's what is really kind of attractive. I mean, that you're talking, and you've got, you got your mobsters involved. You've got got some real seamy characters involved in this thing, and yet you've got young people, 40, 15 years old, who are involved in trying to solve what happened in a particular crime, and who are not put off by the old heads at all. And I think it's also kind of a really in terms of how things have changed. This may be set back a little further actually in time, but it does relate to me in terms of, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday in terms of the difference that young people are so much more less afraid before. Back in the old days, there are things you didn't speak up against the elders. You didn't. Exactly. If you knew they were wrong, that you never spoke out, and that was respectful. Today, younger people, they view it as respect is earned, and gray hairs doesn't mean it's earned, So, they're like, you got to show it to me, and I think that particular character, particularly this detective, is her detective, is she's just tough as nails, and just calm. When somebody, one scene which resounds to me is when the owner of the bank is just yelling, it really just where you think her hair be blowing back, and she just calmly comes back. It's kind of like, are you done? Yeah. And then comes back, it's like, here's what the real deal is, and take it or leave it, because I'm not sweating this, and just the methodical way that she sees what's going on, and the respect she has from her friends, who know her abilities. It's just the ability to run a story together he commands my respect with that.
And just supplementing what you've already said, which I think, you've done wonderful, Keith, in describing the essence of what Michael's doing there. I as a, classic movie buff, particularly 30s, 40s, pulps kind of thing, the thing that I came away with, which I enjoyed so much, was that the whole group, this gang, reminds you, those of you, and I'm dating myself, the Bowery Boys, the East Side Kids, that they were tough kind of guys, but they had really good hearts, right?
Right.
And they always ended up doing something. After a while, I think as it evolved to the Bowery Boys in the 50s, they were doing stuff actually like similar to what NOLA is doing. People call on them to help out when there's problems. So you got that, and there's a kind of a classic Detroit piece. I think he's in circa 60s, I think it is.
Yeah.
Time period thereabouts.
I believe so.
And kind of a rich mixed ethnic kind of location too in Detroit. Yeah. So you really get a full treat of a perspective, very very distinct, unique story in this issue.
Yeah,
that NOLA provides. So, well, you know what? I'm going to go right on, and I'll talk about TT and Tess, and you can wrap it up talking about your awesome story. So, those who've been following Tanya Tomorrow and Tesseract Addlesworth's adventure, it started early in our first issue last year, and we're wrapping it up now. Tess, the youngest, is found. She is in a dimension outside of ours, in which she's discovered there's a relative. In fact, they have a whole family history in this advanced dimension, which, by the way, in this dimension, there was no African slave trade or anything like that. So African Americans have evolved in very unique and different ways. She is, in fact, the relative of a superhero, he's a quantum engineer who has the gift of creating various cycling kind of devices that actually come from him as a result of mixing both quantum physics and deep meditation. And now, one of the things that you'll enjoy, I had a lot of fun. This was a God moment for me. I discovered it as I was writing this. These Tess and the cyclists go against this horrible monster that's trying to destroy things in that dimension. And he's trained her, prepared her, so she's actually working with him. And when they go into their superpower mode, they actually communicate using quantum physics equations. And I say it's a God moment because when I was writing this, I said, wow, it would be awesome if they could do that. And Keith, this character, the cyclist, is actually like all of our characters. They're like from our, they've recycled. I created this character some years ago. And initially, what he would do, he would speak, his narrative was in meditation. Mm-hmm. He was speaking kind of a meditative frame, but I wanted to do something different. So it'll be interesting to see how it's received by readers in terms of how the quantum equations are being used. These are real equations, and I actually kind of tracked them down and kept them consistent with the kind of things that the characters are doing. I'll just put it that way. But of course, if we get a call from a theoretical physicist and say, wait a minute, that's a bunch of gibberish, I'm going to say, okay, but it works. But anyway, so that's, again, Tess and the cyclist, they have this awesome adventure. She does get back home, but I'm not going to talk about how she does. And so, so hope readers have fun with this.
Yeah, no, I said, I mean, this, and I love, I've been, obviously following the series, this third piece. And it's interesting too, because this is your first trilogy, and my trilogy is concluding in this issue as well. And But the thing I thought about yours, and I think I told you before, I said, this piece to me was like one is worthy of Asimov's or something, and then I don't want to elevate
Wow.
Asimov's above, because but it's been there longer, so you got to give props. Where our aspiration, of course, is
Thank
to
you.
be right up there with the best of them. But I said, but with that, like what you just described, those quantum equations, and of course, I failed math in high school, so I respect anybody.
Me too, Keith. Listen, I was at Wayne County Community College trying to get my credits before I got on to the big leagues, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in math. Yeah.
In math, yeah, math was not my subject. I mean, and I think so. Seeing, watching this funny side story, I know it's funny because I always kind of prop myself up with this, because I was, always had a problem with math. But the other thing I realized, and sometimes with some kids, is sometimes it's because I always had to do things my own way, and
right.
and something
exactly
some things I just couldn't get. But I will never forget, and I'm always kind of pat myself on the back with this. In college, my college roommate was in advanced mathematics. He was like in the top level math. He and I were real good friends. He was going to be an engineer, and he was on these classes where for the whole class they were working on 3 equations. That was your assignment. It wasn't like a book. It's like that was it.
Yeah.
And so we're sitting there, and he had this one equation. And he said, I just can't get this one. And I looked at it and I said, well, let me take a look at it. And he just cracked up. I'm a right. And I just said, what the hell? And I stopped looking. I said, well, let me take a look. And I was looking at it in half an hour. I figured it out. And he said, he said, how the hell did you do it? And I drew this little. I said, well, I figured that you draw this and then like that. And he's like, holy, and he says that.
Yes.
And he said, but then when he took it to class, he said, my roommate, and they said no, because he didn't use the proper. There are certain ways that you're supposed to go to get that thing. And I'm like, yeah, but I solved it.
That's right. Well, Keith, that's the interesting thing about quantum mechanics and quantum physics. That's a level in math and science and engineering now where it's kind of there, almost like a God area. And I say that, more generically, there are variables, things, creativity is part of it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because we are all math literate, but following that route that you have to follow sometimes, that's like writing too.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah.
Writing means like let somebody come their own way, and I think, but yeah, and Bubak, I know we're almost running out of time, although we
let's hear about yours.
But yeah, the Into the Dawn, which is the third concluding episode of Where Does That Alley Go, and I had a lot of fun with this, and fun of course, this is based on the whole story started with the Green Garage, which is a real place, of course, in Midtown Detroit, and I had the idea when Tom and Peggy Brennan had they did this presentation about how the Green Alley was created. So behind it was this environmentally sustainable. Everything was changed. It was really, really a beautiful place. And they've done miracles down there, and they've got a hotel down there and everything else down there now. But they were talking about what it was before when they bought the building, was back when it was still a chaos corridor, and there were, crack addicts and everything else in the alley and all that. And then it's been cleaned up and changed. And now what has happened to the alley and how it became that. And it was a fascinating presentation. And for some reason it clicked out to me and said, man, this would be a great story. If I could just do a takeoff on this. I asked them, because they had they recorded their presentation. I said, well, can you send me that? And all I need is the audio. And I transcribed the audio, and I basically wrote a story around the audio of what he was describing that. And that was the first episode, and it came out to be, where it was the old Detroit, where they've been raining for 5 years. And there are now creatures that can't, the plants that turn to certain creatures at night, and then at the very end, of course, Tom discovers this new Detroit, which is another dimension at the end of the alley, where there's no rains and it's only children there. And then the second one, of course, is them getting more acquainted with the children over there and finding what their background is, and come to find out that they're, and every time they go, the time changes. There's always the time changes and like that. And when he comes back, he thinks he's been gone for a few days, it's been weeks, that sort of thing. And so when he gets back this time, I think it's a couple of years later, he doesn't know that when he gets to the new Detroit, and turns out they're at war, because all the children are 12, all of them are 12 years old. and because something having to do with the time continuum, and they're at war with kids who are 9 from even another dimension, and they arrive during this when the onslaught is getting ready to happen, and so they're talking with them, and that ends there. So at the ending, he's one of the young kid, the leader of them, is basically wondering, will he bring help, and is he going to bring what and he doesn't know whether he will or not, and the young kids are the other kids are wondering as well, and the kids, but they're not really kids, they've because they've been around a long time, and they've sustained themselves in this area with no help from anybody for who knows how long, and they're not even quite sure how long they've been there. And so at the end, this third concluding chapter or part, what this is when he's Tom and Peggy are back in the regular Detroit, and at this time the green garage is just torn down, and it's just really broken down, and the vines and the plants have taken over, and they're wondering what has happened to it. And then somebody who's an old green garage person is basically knocking at the door. And what this, and like I said, without going through the whole thing, what this whole series, this part is, and what, as again, your favorite part, it's that what's that you say, the makes you feel good at the end,
redemptive, or
redemptive, yeah, it's kind of redemptive, but it's uplifting. I think more at the end is what I'm looking for, is uplifting.
Definitely.
Because they're going through what has happened, and the fear, and there's a lot of dealing with the fear that you would imagine people would have who have lived under these conditions for this long, and in terms of not knowing what's going to happen and what has changed, and originally, of course, all these conditions of the rains and the plants and the weird creatures, they're all just in Detroit, but then in this final section, they come to find out it's spread beyond Detroit, people thought it was kind of laughing in Detroit for a while, said, why don't you ever leave, and now everybody's being infected with this. And I think it's dealing with that. But the point at the end is there's an uplifting session, because, and when I was writing it, I didn't quite know how I wanted to end. I made it, I just said, well, should they go back and be involved in the wars, and then how would I deal with that, or how would it go? And then I figured out there was a way to do it where it would bring everything back together, I think in an uplifting way, and I think with people, but I think the thing that I was really focused on, I felt better about it when I reread it. And when I was writing it, I felt okay, but I wasn't sure. But just because I thought it was too long, but was a section when they're having meetings, because the people are they want to know, what should we do? And there's that anger that, people have, like say when you're in a pressure cooker situation and you just don't trust anymore, and somebody's trying to tell you there's something better, but you have to take a risk. And I think that the whole group was just wondering, do we really want to take that risk? You become accustomed to, like I said, the devil is more comfortable than the devil you don't, and I think that's the question that a lot of the green garages are asking themselves, like, yeah, it's pretty bad here, but we know how to deal with this bad, and you're telling us about something else.
The complete unknown.
Yeah, right? Complete unknown. Yeah. And it's like, and so how are we supposed to deal with that? And so anyway, so there's that. And I said, without giving away too much, but I will say that Tom was the one who suggested, he said, can you make this a 3-part? He was excited when I said, when I'm writing the first one. He said, this should be a trilogy. And at first I'm like, how am I gonna make this a trilogy? And I said that, I'm gonna give this a run. And I'm glad I did. So I'll be excited to tell him that it's actually, that it has actually came out, but it's a fun piece. That's a fun piece, I think. So those are our stories. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I just think that you the mood in it. I could teach a class just on this trilogy, talking about the mood, how you develop the rainy. It was very Blade Runner-ish, the original one.
Yeah,
how it was always raining, and it just and that is very significant in the story too. And of course. And the final piece, I think you touch a little bit on the metaphoric piece about us going to another planet.
Yeah.
Do we stay here and struggle, or do we go to someplace unknown? But it's a new frontier. Those kind of decisions collectively, from humanity standpoint, eventually that we're going to have to make decisions like that.
Exactly. So, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. Good stuff. All right, brother.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm glad once again, I guess I'm glad we're doing this again, and we will to our listeners, we're definitely not the last one. We're kicking this back into gear. So we'll be coming back once a month to discuss writing, and like I said, of course, the quarterly comes out quarterly, as we say, but we come back once a month to talk about writing and sci-fi issues and all kinds of other things. So stay tuned for next month when we will come back to you again to talk about more things sci-fi and DSQ and all of that. And so looking forward to it. Looking like it's a new year, new energy, new focus, new directions. So thanks everybody.
So,
we'll see. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, in the immortal words of one of my characters, the light years are being fulfilled.
Right.
We'll talk about that in our next show.
Next time, right?